The Dings were, by all accounts, the model family. Jeff and his wife Helen were kind and friendly people, with their daughters Zing and Alice. Jeff was a senior lecturer at Manchester Metropolitan University School of Chemical and Environmental Science. The entire family were gifted musicians, and Zing was described as a model student who always excelled at school, on her way to receiving 4 A stars in chemistry, Latin, mathematics and biology. She had received an offer from the University of Nottingham to study medicine in autumn of 2011, and likewise Alice was also incredibly gifted and well liked by her classmates and teachers.
Alice was an extremely dedicated student. She loved life and was very popular with everyone. She was just a delightful student. Alice and her family were really talented musicians. I'm absolutely certain she would have gone on to a professional level, and I would have seen her playing orchestras. Maybe the Philharmonic, who knows?
She was a lovely young girl who would have gone on to achieve great things. She was a pleasure to have as a member of the school. She was incredibly hard-working. Staff who were here with Alice will look for those qualities in students now.
Her whole attitude to learning is something we would love for all of our students. To love learning and grab every opportunity. That's what Alice was like. She was always at the forefront of it, just enjoying life.
I still sit in the same place and remember him sitting there. Jeff was a really nice, friendly bloke. He got on with everyone and always had a smile on his face.
Helen worked at the school as a part-time tutor teaching Mandarin. She was a really lovely lady, and we often saw her at parents' evening. She was a real part of our school community.
The family resided in a nice and quiet suburb of Northampton, England, known as Wootton. But this doesn't mean they didn't have a past that would unfortunately come back to haunt them. In the past, Jeff and Helen were business partners with Ang Xiang, running a Chinese herbal remedy shop together in Birmingham, but it didn't work out. Another business partner was a man by the name of Paul Delaney, and in 1999 this conflict led to Ang Xiang filing a civil act against Jeff and Helen Ding, a dispute that lasted over 10 years. On April the 28th, 2011, Du finally lost the dispute and was now faced with a bill of £88,000 and served a court order preventing him from disposing of any of his assets. The next morning, Ang Xiang told his wife that he was going to work before instead, at 10:44 AM, boarding a train from Coventry to Birmingham, concealing a knife inside his bag as well as his passport. He then boarded a train to Northampton town centre and proceeded to get on a bus to Wootton, supposedly arriving around 1:35 PM. Jeff Ding was in his kitchen when he looked up to see Ang Xiang enter the back gate of his garden and began to approach him. Ding believed that this was just going to be another business confrontation, but little did he know that it would unfortunately be a lot worse. Upon entering the home, Du demanded his money that he was owed, to which Jeff laughed at him. Ang Xiang felt humiliated by this and snapped, stabbing Jeff Ding 23 times to kill him. At this point, Jeff's wife Helen ran into the room and Du turned his attention to her, stabbing her 13 times to death. The two daughters, who were 18 and 12 at this point, were upstairs in their bedroom, and upon hearing the commotion, Zing called the police at 3:32 PM. But midway through the call, Ang Xiang burst in and their screams could be heard on the other end of the line. Du proceeded to kill both children, stabbing Zing 11 times and Alice 4. Unfortunately, this call would go nowhere, as the operator provided the incorrect address to instead send officers to Coventry Park, nearly 3 miles away. When they arrived at the wrong address, there was no incident, so despite the screams over the phone, they believed there was nothing wrong, and left the property.
The recording of a specific wrong address on the incident log misled officers into believing that all was apparently well, when the reality was the extreme opposite.
After murdering the entire Ding family, Ang Xiang actually stayed inside the house for over 6 hours, even going to sleep, before stealing their Vauxhall Corsa despite only having a provisional driving license. So this is the exact street that the family actually lived on back in 2011. This would have been the route that the killer would have taken after committing those horrible acts, and this would be the beginning of when he would just go on the run from the law. At 9:43 PM, he stopped at the junction 15A services on the M1, buying a map of Northamptonshire. He then attempted to locate their other business partner, Paul Delaney, but he was either unable to find him or Paul wasn't home. Du then drove to London and somehow automatic number plate recognition failed to detect the stolen car, but he then abandoned the vehicle in St John's Wood. On April the 30th, he purchased a one-way ticket to Paris with his own passport, which is when his wife decided to report her husband missing. The next day at 8 AM, police actually visited the home of the Ding family, looking for Ang Xiang, believing that he would most likely contact them during his disappearance. But when no one answered the door, they simply left the property. Later that same day, their neighbour Jason Horsley was growing concerned for the family, as he hadn't seen or heard from them, so he also attempted to make contact. Much like the police officers, nobody answered the door, but he then peered through the window to see the bloodbath 2 days after it was made. I saw a pair of legs, then I noticed it was blood on the floor.
There was a young female child laid on the bed with her head on a headrest. She was curled up and facing away from me. She was in her preteens, probably between 10 to 11 years old. I could not see her face, but I could see a lot of blood on the bed. She was doubled up in only what I can describe as a prayer position, with her upper body slumped and her arms out. There was a lot of blood on the carpet. The blood was thick and black in colour. I was slightly sick at the sight of the two children and I had to catch my breath.
I was an experienced murder investigating officer, and I don't think I've seen anything so horrific in my career. This is the one part of the investigation you try and laser remove from your brain. It's just horrendous. While that murder was going on, they tried to ring the police, and the screams from those calls, that's going to haunt me until they carry me out in a box. They should be here telling an entirely different story, and the way they were brutally wiped out doesn't bear thinking about. For many months, I lived it, breathed it. It was my life. I was looking through the Metro and there was a picture of Jeff, and I read this story. I felt absolute disbelief. My mind said it's not him, even though his name was in the report. Everyone was in shock. No one is made for that. We are insular academics. If someone gets run over, that happens, but something like that, with that butchery, it's horrific. It was a tragic, tragic loss. The days after the murder were extremely tough. Tragically, some students lose their lives, but with the way in which this happened, it was uncharted territory. The impact of this grief was school-wide, community-wide, and we needed to deal with that.
It's the most shocking and tragic event I've ever experienced in my whole career. It was incredibly sad. They were just a brilliant, wonderful family, and we miss them very much.
The school laid daffodils down in memory of the fallen children. My daughter was a good mother, a good wife, and she taught the two girls very well. Hearing all the evidence is like a knife to the body. When the two families heard about this, it was like the whole sky had fallen down. We all cried together. I would ask Du, why did you do what you have done? How can you be so cruel? On May the 4th, Ang Xiang's photo was released to the public, and he very quickly became the #1 suspect. It wasn't until May the 11th when the abandoned car was found, having gained 9 parking tickets in the process. CCTV of Du travelling around that day was then discovered, and over 240 police officers were sent on this manhunt to track down the killer. Initially, they believed it may have been a murder-suicide, and focused on the possibility of Ang Xiang travelling to London, Manchester or the Midlands, before realising that he most likely fled the country, checking out all airports and Eurostar services, but finding nothing. After arriving in Paris, Ang Xiang travelled through Spain and then caught a ferry from Algeciras over to Tangier in Morocco. He then proceeded towards Wootton near the Algerian border, where he was actually arrested on suspicion of being an illegal immigrant. However, he was released as they were unable to identify him, having absolutely no idea that he was wanted for murder. Ang Xiang remained hidden and on the run for around 14 months. In the middle of 2012, the police aired an appeal, and a construction site worker in Morocco saw it and recognised Ang Xiang from the photo. He was then tracked down living in a partially built block of flats, sleeping on a makeshift bed, cooking food on a small gas-powered stove. On July the 7th that year, Ang Xiang was arrested, but it took 3 days to correctly identify him as the murderer. On July the 19th, a 54-year-old woman in Coventry, a 39-year-old woman in Gloucester, a 22-year-old woman in Southend, and a 25-year-old man in London were arrested on suspicion of aiding him to escape the country and remain hidden, but they were all later released on bail. By February 2013, Ang Xiang was extradited back to the UK, and the trial was due to begin in April, but Du's Mandarin interpreter failed to show up, so it was pushed back. On November 4th, 2013, Ang Xiang Du denied all counts of murder. Although he confessed to killing the Ding family, he claimed to have been depressed and stressed due to the financial burden, and that he snapped and was unable to maintain control, so therefore he should be convicted of manslaughter and not murder. He was also supposedly showing remorse for his actions, though many doubted this to be genuine, including the judge. These were cold-blooded murders which, in my judgment, were premeditated and were considered acts of revenge. You did not lose your self-control in killing Jeff Ding. In effect, you executed the man you hated. The psychological and emotional impact of the destruction of the entire Ding family upon Jiafeng and Helen Ding's parents and the rest of their families has been truly devastating. This was a brutal, shocking crime. Ang Xiang Du travelled to the Ding's family armed with a knife and killed the whole family in their home. The evidence was clear that this was an act of premeditated revenge, and Du knew what he was doing. The Ding family were honest, hard-working and well-liked people. It is a tragedy that their lives were cut short in this way. Our thoughts and condolences are with their family and friends. I am quite satisfied that it was hatred, anger, and your desire for revenge that motivated you to act as you did on the 29th of April, not the moderate depression you suffered. Du, a practitioner of Chinese medicine, launched a frenzied attack on Jeff Ding, killing him with a savage butchery. By the time you left the shop in Birmingham that morning at the latest, you had already formulated a plan to go to Northampton to kill the Ding family with the knife and then flee the jurisdiction. No doubt your counsel will explain to you there is only one sentence I can pass for this. It only took 3 hours for the jury to deliberate, finding Ang Xiang Du guilty of 4 counts of murder. Du had successfully evaded detection for months. That's why I say he was a man with a plan. He had not hit any radar. It has been one of the biggest and worst cases in terms of the loss of life, the nature of the killings, and the number of challenges police faced throughout the investigation. Jeff's university decided to honour him by creating the Jeff Ding Chemistry Prize for students, which Hannah Donahue ended up winning in 2020.
After reading how Jeff supported students, I'm sure he would be extremely proud of the current team in the chemistry department. I hope to follow in Jeff's footsteps and make him proud.
When speaking to the Ding's extended family, the judge stated, "I have observed the dignified way in which you have conducted yourselves throughout this trial, which must have been truly horrendous for you in a way that the rest of us cannot understand. I know nothing I can say will assuage the pain of the deaths of your sister, daughter and family. I just hope that at least the fact the man responsible for their deaths has been brought to justice will provide you with some closure over these terrible events." Hello guys, this is Rob from Seeking Answers. I really hope you enjoyed that episode. If you do want to see more, please consider donating to Patreon or clicking that join button below to become a channel member. Unfortunately, YouTube's monetization doesn't really cater to the content that we make, so we do need all the help that we can get. I also realise that not everyone is able to give a monthly payment, so there is now a PayPal link in the description if anyone does want to donate a one-off payment. Doesn't matter the amount, any amount is appreciated. And if you do a one-off payment, you'll be able to request a case for us to cover, and it will really go towards helping the channel out and continuing to grow the community. Any amount is appreciated and it will go towards keeping this channel alive and making more content, going on location more. You will get perks in exchange and you will help really give this channel the boost it needs. Thank you for all of your support and tune in next week for another video.